Welcome to the Seance Society, Tales from the Dead. At Grimwood Manor, the dead speak, and the living listen. The seance has begun. The dead have spoken. They call this tale Kill Screen.
The strip mall on Route 6 hadn't changed in years. The neon sign for suds and stuff buzzed above a row of rain-stained windows, half the letters flickering or burned out. In the daytime, it was a laundromat. At night, it felt more like a hangout for kids who didn't have anywhere else to be. A Coke machine leaned against the wall like it had given up trying. Inside, the air was heavy with the smell of warm detergent, floor wax, and microwave burritos. Past the rows of humming dryers and cracked folding tables, beyond the shelf of sun-faded VHS tapes for rent, Congo, Batman Forever, Showgirls, there was a little hallway that led to the back. The sign above it had once said, Game Zone, but now only 5 of the letters were lit. Someone had scratched hell into the wall next to it with a paperclip.
Eli followed his brother through the hallway, soda in hand, heart already beating faster. The arcade room was small. 5 machines lined up like they'd been shoved in there as an afterthought, surrounded by old chairs, peeling posters, and a single box fan trying to fight the heat. The carpet was so thin in places, it had given up and turned to concrete. But nobody noticed that, because Jace was playing. Jace was 17. Long arms, blue jean jacket, and a tank top stained with sweat and streaks of something mechanical. He was locked into the game, jaw tight, fingers darting over the controls. He looked like he was trying to defuse a bomb. Eli hovered at his shoulder, clutching a grape soda, barely breathing. The game wasn't like the others. There was no cabinet art, no flashy colors, no coin-sucking attract mode yelling fatality or fight. This machine was matte black, the screen flickering with a soft green glow. The words Kill Screen were stenciled in red above the monitor. No logo, no company name, just that. A single joystick, 2 buttons. On the screen, geometric patterns, spinning wheels, collapsing tunnels of static. There was no avatar, no gun, just a pulsing red square dodging black voids. No one knew what it was supposed to be. It was like Tetris had a nervous breakdown inside a haunted Game Boy. Kids whispered about it. If you beat the top score, someone once said, you'll die before the next morning. It was a joke, kind of, but the initials had sat at the top of the screen since before Eli ever came here. D, T, Ch. No one had ever beaten that score. Not even Jace. Until tonight. Tiff stood behind Eli, her Lisa Frank binder clutched to her chest. Trev, the slushy kid, kept sucking on his straw even though it was obviously empty. Noah, the barefoot one, was chewing on the end of a plastic fork. They weren't laughing now. They were watching Jace, like something important was happening. One more level, Jace muttered. I'm right there. The red square darted between glitching triangles. The screen pulsed like it was going to explode. Mia stepped closer. She looked nervous, even in the half-light, her arms crossed so tight her black nail polish was chipping off on her sleeves. Stop it, she said low. Don't do it. For real, Jace, please. Jace didn't answer. His eyes didn't leave the screen. It's just a game, he said. Relax. Then why's your hand shaking? She asked. He didn't respond. He pressed forward. The score ticked higher. The screen began to hum, then a sound like an old computer freezing. The patterns collapsed. The screen flashed white, a slow fade. New high score, enter initials. Jace blinked,
took a breath. He turned just slightly to Eli. "You're gonna have to beat this one someday," he said, smiling, then typed in JAC. The screen glitched again, for a second too long. Then it blinked back to life. The soda machine behind them rattled once. One of the washers in the laundry room buzzed hard enough to make the lights flicker. It passed. Nobody said anything. Then Tiff whispered, "He actually did it." Noah elbowed her. Hard. "Shut up." Trev dropped his cup. Mia stepped back from the machine like it had hissed. Jace stood there, breathing fast, his grin flickering like the screen. His hands were trembling just a little, but he wiped them on his jeans like it was nothing. "Told you I'd smoke it," he said. No one cheered. No one else touched the machine. "Let's go," Mia said. "Please." Jace slung an arm around her shoulders. His eyes were still on the screen. Eli watched him like he was a god. He thought, that was the coolest thing I've ever seen. They walked out together. The arcade faded behind them, buzzing. Outside, the cicadas screamed. The Georgia sun was merciless. It pressed down like a punishment, soaking the black clothes of the funeral party and turning breath into steam. There were no trees at the edge of Haven Hill Cemetery, just yellowing grass and a few bleached headstones. A preacher spoke at the head of the grave, one hand raised and the other gripping a leather Bible. His voice was dry and over-rehearsed, like he said the same thing 100 times already this month. "We gather today to say goodbye to a young man taken too soon. A life full of promise, cut short. We may not understand the Lord's will, but..." Eli didn't hear the rest. He stood beside his mother, who was shaking with soft sobs, her mascara pooling at the edges of her sunglasses. Her blouse was buttoned wrong. Her shoes didn't match. She'd been too out of it to notice, and Eli hadn't said a thing. She'd cried the entire drive here. She hadn't let go of the tissue in her hand since the doorbell rang a week ago. The casket sat at the edge of a freshly dug hole, glossy and absurd looking. A pair of men in dark jumpsuits stood behind it, waiting. Not funeral people, just guys with a job to do. It was closed. No open casket, no last look, no peaceful expression. They didn't say why. Someone in the crowd whispered something about an accident. Someone else said he had been running with a bad crowd. Someone else mumbled drug addicts, like it was a contagious word. Eli just stared at the casket. He held the folded funeral program in both hands. "In loving memory of Jace Michael Weller, 1978 to 1995. There was a photo in the corner, one of the few where Jace was actually smiling, not smirking. It made his chest hurt to look at. He folded it once, then again, tighter, tighter still. He slid it into his wallet next to a spare $5 and his student ID. That's when he saw the trading card behind the plastic sleeve. The corner was worn soft from being taken out and put back 100 times. Marvel Universe Series 2. Daredevil. Red suit. Baton raised, glossy as glass. Jace had given it to him when he broken his arm in the 6th grade. Eli had cried, and Jace, 10 pounds heavier and 4 years cooler, had crouched beside his hospital bed and pulled the card from his own shoebox collection. "He's the best," Jace had said. "Doesn't even need to see. He just knows." Eli stared at the card now as the straps on the casket began to whine. The men at the back let the coffin down slowly, carefully, like they were afraid of waking someone up. The ropes creaked. Dust kicked up. A woman 2 rows behind Eli started crying harder, but he didn't turn around. He couldn't move. Later, after the service had ended, and people were drifting toward their cars like they couldn't wait to pretend nothing had happened, Eli hung back, near the edge of the parking lot, The sun was lower now. The light felt like it was coming through a dirty window. He was half watching the clouds when he heard a voice nearby. "If there's anything I can do." The voice belonged to an older kid, someone from school, maybe 2 grades up. Hair parted in the middle, dress shirt too big for his shoulders, trying to sound helpful. Eli turned slightly. Mia stood 10 feet away, her arms wrapped around herself like she was trying to hold her skin on. Her makeup had completely melted. Black tracks down her cheeks, streaks of red around her nose and chin. Her hand shook. She stared at the boy for a second like she didn't understand the words. Then she snapped. "Anything you can do? Someone smashed my boyfriend's brains in." Her voice cracked halfway through. People turned. Someone gasped. "Over some fucking game." She broke, stumbling backwards, clutching her face as she turned and ran between 2 parked cars, her sobs echoing like something from an old horror movie. The boy stood frozen, mouth open. Then he looked around, embarrassed, and started walking toward the other side of the lot. Eli didn't say anything. He just turned toward his mother's car, opened the passenger door, and climbed inside. She was already there, staring straight ahead, still crying softly behind her sunglasses. She didn't speak. Neither did he. The door shut with a hollow thud. The sun dipped lower, and the Daredevil card, slick with sweat, was still in his hand.
7 years had passed since the funeral, and Eli hadn't really spoken about Jay since. He graduated. Barely. His mom had never recovered. Not fully. She floated through rooms now like a ghost with a shopping list. Always tired. Always on the verge of asking something she didn't want answered. She didn't want him to move out either. Said it too many times. Cried the day he left. But Eli had to go. He needed to not wake up in a house where Jace's door was still cracked open like he might walk out of it one day. So he moved into a trailer with a guy he barely knew, Tyler, a forklift driver who played bass in a punk band that hadn't played a show in 2 years. The trailer sat just off a cracked 2-lane road with no streetlights, nestled in a half-abandoned lot behind an old barbecue joint. The rent was cheap. The shower never quite got warm. There were beer cans in the sink and burn marks on the table. But it was his now. Eli stocked shelves overnight at Bargain Zone. Minimum wage, no benefits. Time didn't move inside that store, just a slow rotation of fluorescent hum and floor wax and bad radio. You got used to it. It was 2 weeks after moving in when he realized he didn't have a washer or dryer. He stared at the heap of clothes piled in the corner of his room. Work polos, socks, a hoodie stained with what he hoped was mustard, and realized he'd been wearing the same pair of jeans for 6 days. He didn't avoid suds and stuff on purpose. Not exactly. It just hadn't come up. Maybe somewhere in the back of his mind he had shut it away.
That Saturday, he stuffed his laundry into a trash bag, grabbed a bottle of the cheapest detergent he could find, and drove the 12 minutes back across town. Suds and stuff looked almost the same. Someone had repainted the outside a faded beige, like it might trick people into thinking it was new. Inside, though, still the same sickly tile floor. Same rows of machines clanging like oil drums. Same sun-bleached posters on the wall offering, "Wash 5 loads, get 1 free." A few chairs had been swapped out. A new soda machine sat where the old one used to wheeze, and someone had added a speaker behind the counter that played soft, sad country at low volume. But the smell was still there. Detergent and hot air, and something faintly metallic. Eli found an open washer, poured in his clothes, measured detergent like it mattered. Then he reached into his wallet for quarters and paused. Tucked behind a $5 bill, folded just enough to hide, was the Daredevil card. Still glossy, still red, still worn just enough around the edges to prove it had been held, touched, worried over. Jace's voice echoed in the back of his skull, years old but sharp. He's the best. He doesn't even need to see. Eli stared at it a second longer, then slipped it back and fed quarters into the machine. The cycle started with a deep shudder. He turned, almost without thinking, and walked toward the back hallway. The game zone sign was gone. Torn off, maybe. Just a blank rectangle of discolored wall where it used to hang. But the hallway was still there. In the back room. Still waiting. It was quiet inside. Fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, a box fan lazily rotating. A couple of the cabinets had been replaced. Newer models. Flashy lights, digital screens. One was a racing game that advertised online leaderboards. But the back corner? That cabinet was still there. Kill screen. Same matte black frame. Same red stencil name. No article screen blinking softly, pulsing green text against darkness. Eli walked closer. Dust had gathered along the coin slot. The joystick was discolored, worn down to a shine in the center. The buttons felt soft when he tapped one, like they hadn't been pushed in a long time. But the machine was on, still humming. He stared at the screen as the demo started. A red square pulsed through static, the tunnel of collapsing shapes. That same janky loop of synth tones, just slightly off, like it had been corrupted by time or heat or memory. Then the attract loop ended, and the high score screen appeared. Eli's breath caught. The initials blinked one at a time. DTH, KRL, MJK, DTH, JAC. There it was. 5th place now. Jace. The same score, untouched, like the game remembered. But above him, twice now, DTH was back. Eli took a step back. His chest felt cold. He didn't hear the footsteps behind him. Hey! Eli nearly jumped out of his skin. A man stood in the doorway, holding a handful of soggy quarters. Early 30s, tank top stained with bleach, eyes sunken from long nights. You got change? The man asked. Eli blinked, swallowed. Nah, sorry. The man grunted and walked off without another word. Eli turned back to the machine. The screen had gone dark again. Waiting. He stared for a few more seconds, then shook his head, turned and walked back to the washers. That night, back in the trailer, Eli lay on his mattress, staring at the ceiling fan spinning above him. The room was quiet except for Tyler's muffled snoring through the paper-thin walls. The Daredevil card sat on the nightstand beside him. He didn't touch it. Didn't move. Just lay there, thinking about a blinking green screen in the dark. That night, Eli dreamed of the old house. He was a kid again, 7 or 8, barefoot on the carpet, the TV buzzing softly with static in the next room. The hall light was on, casting long shadows, and the kitchen smelled like frozen pizza. Jace was there too, but younger. 13, maybe. His face looked different. Rounder, untouched by whatever time had done to him. He wore the same white tank top and cargo shorts he used to run around in, back when the world was smaller and summer seemed to last forever. Jace was smiling, arms crossed like he had a secret. "Let's play," he said. "Play what?" Eli asked, already knowing. "Hide and seek," Jace said, grinning wide. "I'll count. You hide." Eli was gone before Jace even started counting. The dream shifted. He was walking through the old house now. Creaking floorboards, popcorn ceiling, the door to the garage that always stuck. He thought of hiding in the usual places. Behind the couch, under the stairs, in the closet where they used to keep board games and winter coats. He walked into the hallway. Something felt off. The doors weren't where they were supposed to be. One stood halfway open at the end of the hall, a door he didn't recognize. Painted white, brass knob, faint light leaking from beneath. Eli hesitated, then stepped toward it. It opened without a sound. He wasn't in the house anymore. He was in the funeral home. The air turned thick and cold. The lights were dim, stained glass windows casting colorless patterns across the carpet. There were folding chairs lined up in neat rows. The smell of carnations and antiseptic clung to everything. At the front of the room was a closed casket, surrounded by flowers, just like before. Eli walked slowly toward it, feet heavy. Chase. His voice felt wrong in his throat, small, echoing. He reached out, lifted the lid.
Inside lay his brother, but older now, the age he was when he died. Chase's face was wrong. His skull had been crushed and reconstructed, like someone tried to put it back together with meat and staples. His jaw was twisted, lips seamed with surgical thread. One of his eyes had caved inward. The skin around his forehead was folded, stretched, patched. He looked like a doll that had been kicked down a stairwell, then glued together by someone who had never seen a human face before. Eli staggered back. Then a voice behind him, software wet. Eli! Eli turned. Jace was standing there, not in the casket, behind him, alive, sort of. Except his head was beaten to a pulp, just like it must have been. Bone shattered. One side of his skull caved in like dropped fruit. Blood streamed from his nose, ears, eyes. His teeth were exposed through a crack in his cheek, his neck bent the wrong way. Still, he was smiling. Found you, Jace whispered, blood bubbling at the corner of his mouth. Eli woke up choking. He sat bolt upright in bed, gasping for air, shirt soaked through with sweat. The fan spun lazily overhead. The trailer was dark, still, silent. No footsteps, no whispering, no blood. Just the sound of his own breathing, and the slow, endless buzz of his brain trying to reboot. He swung his legs over the side of the mattress, rubbed his face, reached for water and nearly knocked over the nightstand. The Daredevil card had fallen to the floor. He stared at it a long time before picking it up, and even longer before going back to sleep.
The next day crawled. The fluorescents in Bargain Zone hummed louder than usual. The stockroom smelled like hot plastic and feet. Somewhere near aisle 9, a child was screaming over a box of off-brand cereal. Eli had the register today. He stood there, barely blinking. He'd only gotten a few hours of sleep. The dream clung to him like humidity. Every time he blinked, he saw Jace's face again, not the young version, the broken one. He tried to distract himself, sorted the impulse buy shelf for the 5th time, flipped a Sharpie between his fingers until it cracked, tried to count how many ceiling tiles were stained with water damage. Didn't help. His co-worker Shane walked by around noon with a pricing gun in one hand and a can of soda in the other. Shane was maybe 25, wore a hat that said, "Fish Fear Me," and a name tag that said, "Manager in Training," even though he never did anything but complain about his ex. He was a year or two older than Jace. Eli had recognized him the moment they met, but they'd never really talked about it. Until now. "You go to Haven High?" Eli asked casually, like he didn't already know. Shane popped the cap on the soda and nodded. "Class of 94, he said. "Go Wolverines or whatever." Eli smirked. "You remember that laundromat off Route 6? Suds and stuff? Still there, ain't it?" Eli nodded. He didn't look up. "They had that arcade in the back, with the weird games. Shane grinned. You mean that creepy-ass black cabinet? What was it called? Kill screen. Eli barely got it out. Shane snapped his fingers. Yeah, that's the one. Used to freak me out. Thought it gave me headaches. Eli paused. You remember that story? The high score thing? Shane tilted his head. Oh, that old bullshit. He chuckled. Yeah, man. Urban legend stuff. My cousin said if you beat the high score, the last guy comes back from the dead to take it back. No, Eli said quickly. Not like that. Just like people dying after beating it. Shane shrugged. He took a sip of his drink. For a moment, he looked more thoughtful than usual. I mean, people said stuff. I didn't know anyone for real. I remember back in the day, the top score was D something. D-E-D, D-T-H. Eli's stomach tightened. Yeah, he said quietly. D-T-H, that's the one. Yeah, that's it. Those letters were always up there. Shane leaned against the register. I think someone said there was a guy named Marcus Kennel or something. He beat the score. I didn't know him, but... He lowered his voice, eyes glancing around like he might get in trouble for saying it. He was found dead, like shot, in his car, out past the quarry. Nobody ever figured out why. Eli's hands tightened on the register drawer. No one caught who did it? Shane shook his head. Nope. Rumors, but nothing real. People said it had something to do with drugs, or a girl, or maybe it was just random. He stood up straight again. But yeah, everyone at school said it was 'cause he beat the game. Spooky crap. Like Bloody Mary for the Sega generation. He laughed at that and wandered off to finish pricing toilet paper. Eli stared at the checkout screen for a long time. His reflection caught faintly in the plastic. This guy, Marcus Kennel, shot in his car. That must have been MJK on the leaderboard. And now, JAC was 5th. 2 others had beaten the top score since Jace, and at least one was killed. The dream flickered behind his eyes again. The casket, the voice, the blood-soaked smile. He blinked and rang up a box of knockoff gummy bears for a woman who never looked him in the eye. After work, Eli didn't go back to the trailer. He drove past the gas station, past the gutted old movie theater where the sign still said, "Now showing Deep Blue Sea," and turned onto the familiar street lined with sagging mailboxes and dry lawns. The house looked the same as it always had. Brown brick, green shutters, a cracked driveway just wide enough for 2 cars. The porch light was still that dull yellow bulb his mom insisted was less attractive to bugs. He parked at the curb, walked up slow. The screen door squeaked exactly the same way it used to when Jace would sneak in past curfew. Inside, the air smelled like old furniture and stale smoke. His mother was in her usual spot, sunken into the floral print recliner like it had grown around her. The TV played a rerun of The Price is Right. The colors too bright, the volume too low. A half-eaten bowl of soup sat on the end table, cold and congealed. She didn't look up when he entered. Just reached for a cigarette with trembling fingers and lit it like it was muscle memory. There was a small mountain of pill bottles on the table beside her ashtray. Orange plastic with white lids, all with her name on them. Anxiety, pain, sleep, mood. Eli stood in the doorway a moment. Hey, Mom. She blinked, slowly turned her head. Her eyes looked right through him. Eli? She said softly. You hungry? No, I'm good. She nodded once. Okay. You get my message about my job? She nodded again, even slower. That's nice, honey. Her cigarette burned down to the filter. She didn't seem to notice. Eli kissed her on the forehead, and she didn't flinch. Just closed her eyes for a second, like maybe it helped. Then he turned and walked down the hallway, past the linen closet, past the bathroom with the chipped tile. He paused outside Jace's room. The door was cracked, the same way it had been since the day after the funeral. No one had opened it in 3 years. He pushed it open. It was exactly the same. The walls were covered in old band posters, 9-inch nails, Soundgarden, some local act called Liemouth he used to follow before they broke up. A lava lamp sat cold on the dresser. The bed was still unmade. A half-open duffel bag sat on the floor, as if Jace might come back any second to grab it, before heading out to meet his friends. Eli stepped inside like he was stepping into a memory. He looked around slowly, touched the edge of the desk, flipped the cracked switch on the lamp. Nothing happened. He sat on the bed. The mattress still had the shape of Jace in it. He smiled just a little. Eli thought back to their childhood. The two of them riding bikes down the drainage ditch, yelling like stuntmen, bawling and bleeding like idiots. He stood, walked to the bookshelf, pulled down a few yearbooks, dust puffing off the spines like breath. He tucked them under his arm, hesitated, then looked toward the corkboard on the wall. A photograph was pinned there with a blue thumbtack. Jace, Eli, Mia. All three of them in front of the old movie theater, holding sodas, laughing. Jace had his arm around both of them. Eli was holding up a ticket stub like it was gold. Mia's mouth was open mid-laugh. He stared at it for a long time, then carefully pulled it from the board. The pin left a tiny hole behind. On the way out, he turned to look at the room one last time, still untouched, still waiting. Nothing moved here. The laundromat was quiet when Eli pulled into the lot. It always was after midnight. The kind of quiet that made the flicker of neon feel too loud. He stepped out of his car, duffel bag slung over one shoulder, 3 of Jace's yearbooks tucked under his arm, a notepad jammed into his back pocket. He hadn't told anyone where he was going. Not that there was anyone to tell. Inside, Suds and Stuff still hummed with low fluorescent buzz. A single overhead light flickered near the change machine, casting twitchy shadows across the old floor tiles. He loaded his laundry like normal. Detergent, quarters, cycle start. And then, without hesitation, walked into the back room. The arcade still had that same strange hush, not silent, but contained, like the sound stayed stuck inside the machines. To his surprise, someone was already in there. A guy stood at the far wall playing a racing game, tall, hoodie up, focused. Eli slowed in the doorway, almost turned around, but the guy didn't look up. So Eli kept walking. Killscreen sat in his usual corner, waiting. Screen glowing dim green like a memory. Eli sat in the plastic chair, pulled out his notepad and pressed a pen to the page. He watched the screen. The demo loop ended. The high score list appeared. He stared at it a long time. The pattern was unmistakable. Every time someone reached a new high score, DTH appeared right after, like it was reclaiming the spot, like someone was waiting for a reason to kill again. 5 people with non-DTH initials. All dead? He knew at least 2 were. It felt too close to be coincidence. Eli opened the first yearbook and began flipping pages. Seniors, juniors, nicknames scribbled in margins, notes in loopy cursive. He found MJK, Marcus James Kinnell, the boy who was found shot to death in his car. He was older, no club photos, just one senior picture where he looked like he didn't want to be there. The only other initials he could match were CTP. Christopher Thomas Parker, who unbelievably had a full-page memorial in Jace's freshman yearbook. Eli didn't recall hearing about his death, but who would tell a 10-year-old about something like that anyway? The others. He flipped, skimmed, scanned. Nothing. No sign of the number 2 or number 3 spot initials. Just blank space and guesswork. His pen tapped against the notepad, leaving a little constellation of dots. Who were they? He circled the 3 names he did have, then a hand grabbed his shoulder.
Eli? He gasped, heart slamming, stomach lurching, spun around. For a split second, he saw it. Jace, standing behind him, broken, blood-soaked, mouth twisted, eyes hollow. Found you. Eli jolted back, nearly toppling the chair. But it wasn't Jace. It was the guy from the other machine. Hoodie down now, face open, startled by Eli's reaction. "Whoa! Sorry, man," the guy said. "Didn't mean to scare you." Eli's chest was heaving, hands shaking. His notebook had fallen to the floor. You startled me," he managed. The man bent down and picked up the notepad, offering it back with a crooked half smile. "You're Eli, right? Jace's brother?" Eli flushed. "Yeah, I'm Eli." The guy nodded, stepping back a bit. He had a soft voice, careful but not awkward. "I knew your brother. I'm sorry he's, gone, you know?" Eli nodded. "Thanks."
Eli suddenly felt very aware of himself. His ratty shirt, wrinkled jeans, and hair he hadn't bothered to fix. The guy in front of him looked like he'd stepped out of a Levi's ad, all easy confidence in those kind eyes. Heat crept into Eli's cheeks. He looked away, quickly. Not now, he thought. Don't be that guy. Not here. He pushed it down, like he always had. The man gave him a moment, then added gently, "I'm actually Mia's cousin, Jonathan." Eli blinked. That name struck something. He vaguely remembered hearing about a cousin who lived a few towns over. Jonathan tucked his hands into the front pocket of his hoodie. "Listen, are you researching that urban legend? I'm not trying to pry." "Oh, yeah," Eli said, voice catching in his throat. "You know it?" Jonathan nodded, arms crossed loosely as he leaned against the side of the cabinet. "Heard of it. Who hasn't at this point?" He looked toward the machine's pulsing green screen like it was a campfire they'd both sat around before. That story's been around for years. Even in Ridgeway, where I live now, people talk about it. The cursed arcade game. Don't beat the high score. All that. He smiled slightly. But I never knew anyone who actually cared enough to try figuring it out. Eli swallowed, feeling the pen in his hand suddenly too tight. "I've been trying to match the initials," he said. "I've got a couple. But these 2... He tapped the notebook, underlining number 3 and number 2, still marked with question marks. "I've hit a wall." Jonathan leaned in. "Let me see." Before Eli could answer, Jonathan stepped forward, closing the gap between them. He leaned over slightly, one hand bracing on the side of the cabinet near Eli's shoulder, the other reaching down to take the pen from Eli's hand. Eli caught a whiff of something clean. Pine soap or aftershave, or maybe just the kind of laundry detergent meant for people who had their shit together. His stomach flipped. He kept his eyes on the notebook, but his heart was hammering. Calm down. It's just someone standing close. You've had friends stand close before, but not like this. Jonathan's hair brushed forward as he wrote, his long fingers surprisingly neat as he penciled in. Number 3, LRS, Liam Ray Stokes. Number 2, EMD, Elias Michael Durham. They're from Ridgeway, Jonathan said, still close. Everyone's heard these names as part of the legend. I actually went to school with Liam's cousin, Elias EMD. He was found dead. What? 2 years ago? OD. Or so they said. He tapped the names once with a pen, then straightened. Eli felt like the temperature had jumped 10 degrees. Jonathan smiled again, more gently this time, reading the fluster on Eli's face but not mocking it. If you need help with all this, you can call me. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a scrap of receipt paper, and scribbled his number down with the same pen. Folded it once, handed it over. Whenever. I don't sleep much anyway. Then with a small nod, he turned and walked out of the arcade room. Hoodie pulled back over his head. The door swung closed behind him with a soft metallic click. Eli stood there, frozen. Notebook in one hand, Jonathan's number in the other. His face was hot, his thoughts loud. Everything smelled like dust and ozone and possibility. He stared at the number, at the 5 names now on his list. 5 dead, 5 that got too close, and always DTH above them. He folded the number carefully and tucked it into the back of the notebook, just behind the photograph of him, Mia, and Jace. Then he clicked his pen once more. Whoever DTH is, they're not done. But neither am I.
That night, Eli dreamed again. He was at the arcade, just like it used to be when he was a kid. Carpet sticky with soda, every machine alive with noise. The fluorescence didn't flicker. The soda machine worked. Street Fighter barked its pixelated taunts from the corner. Someone was winning at Galaga. There were people everywhere, kids, teens, maybe even a few parents, but their faces were just blanks, like smudged reflections in a window. They laughed, they shouted, they played. Eli was at the pinball machine, the one with the broken right flipper that never quite responded when you needed it to. But here, everything worked. The lights danced across the glass, the music chimed and clanged. It was racking up points, almost grinning. Then, "Hey there." A voice behind him. Close. Jonathan. He stepped up behind Eli and placed his chin lightly on Eli's shoulder, just where the collar met skin. His breath was warm, smelled faintly like peppermint. His hands reached forward and covered Eli's, fingers guiding his over the flipper buttons. Eli startled a little, then laughed. A real laugh, high and surprised and completely unguarded. "You're not helping," he said, smiling wide. "You're doing fine," Jonathan whispered. For the first time in... He didn't know how long Eli felt happy. Not just not sad, not numb, not surviving, happy. But then, from the other side of the room came a clamor, a growing noise, a crowd gathering, cheering, chanting. Eli turned his head slightly. The crowd was huddled around a glowing machine, kill screen. His heart dropped like a weight through wet cement. He turned toward it. Jonathan's hand slipped from his. The warmth faded. Eli stepped forward. Everything slowed. The arcade around him melted into a tunnel of sound, cheering, beeping, laughing, static. He walked forward through a molasses blur of slow motion and sudden zooms. The cheering grew louder, hands clapping. He did it. High score. The crowd burst into high fives, whistles, applause. Eli pushed through the bodies. Faceless, clapping, he pressed forward, and then he saw the player, still, standing at the screen, back straight, shoulders locked, the moment Eli got close. Fast, too fast. He jerked toward Eli like a puppet on a wire, buzzing, jumping, shaking, his face bloody,
shattered, teeth falling from his mouth like wet gravel, his body spasmed with unnatural movement, neck cracking, skin blistering, but he was smiling, too wide, too eager. His mouth opened too far, unhinged and splitting at the corners. And then Eli woke up, sitting up so fast he nearly fell off the mattress, gasping. Sweat soaked his chest, his sheets. His heart galloped in his throat. He was crying, quietly but without stopping, tears falling down his face like something had been shaken loose. He looked around the room. The fan spun lazily. The cheap wood paneling of the trailer felt like it was closing in. He wiped his face with the corner of the blanket and lay back down slowly, staring at the ceiling with hollow, aching eyes. The dream clung to him like a wet shirt. Morning finally broke, and Eli again woke up exhausted. But his terrible dream had strengthened his resolve into action. He knew he would have to investigate the last 2 deaths. He sat up, pulled on jeans, a hoodie that didn't smell too bad, and counted out the cash from the coffee tin in his sock drawer. $112 and some change. Enough for gas, snacks, maybe a motel if it came to that. Then he picked up the phone and called Bargain Zone. "Hey, it's Eli." "Yeah, listen. My aunt had a fallout in Chattanooga. I gotta go help out for a few days. No, nothing serious, just, family." It wasn't his best lie, but it worked. He was off the schedule until Monday, his first stop, the public library. The 2 names Jonathan provided in hand, the place still had that carpet that smelled like wet dog and lemon cleaner. But it was quiet and cool, and the woman behind the counter didn't ask why he needed the microfiche reader. Eli sat down at the machine and stared at the blinking blue screen. "This is so stupid," he muttered to himself. Who does this? Who actually comes to the library to scroll through news from 5 years ago like some second-rate detective in a bad movie? But then the film flicked into focus. Local teenager dies of overdose. The photo was grainy. Elias Michael Durham, age 19, found dead in his bedroom, toxicology report pending. Eli found a second headline. Teen stabbed behind Ridgeway High. No photo, no suspects. The article was clipped, clearly part of an ongoing investigation that never went anywhere. But it said the victim was believed to be a friend of Elias. Last seen with him 3 days prior. Stabbed more than a dozen times. No known motive. Eli sat back in the hard plastic chair, arms crossed tight. 2 deaths, same town, 2 days apart. 1 overdose, 1 murder. He flipped to the obituaries next, found both, wrote down the names of the parents. He checked the city phone book, the kind only libraries still carried, and circled 2 addresses. 1 in Ridgeway, the other just outside city limits. A short drive. He folded the paper into his notebook, checked the clock. Still early. Eli stepped out of the library into the bright, late morning sun and paused. Notebook clutched in one hand. Paper with addresses in the other. He had everything he needed. But for some reason, his feet didn't move. He stood on the sidewalk, heart hammering, trying to remember the last time he left town by himself. He couldn't. Not for real. Not like this. Not without someone waiting for him on the other side. The thought crept in before he could stop it. I don't want to do this alone. 10 minutes later, he was pushing open the glass door of Tammy's Tangles, the bell jingling overhead. It smelled like hairspray and peach-scented conditioner. Country music played low from a dusty boombox in the corner. The floor squeaked under his sneakers. Tammy was leaning on the counter, flipping through a magazine with a bored look until she glanced up. Her face lit up like Christmas. Eli? Eli Weller? Oh my God, look at you. She came around the counter like she was greeting a long-lost cousin. You're so grown up, and look at this mop on your head. Boy, come take a seat. Eli flushed, already regretting every decision he'd made that morning. But he sat in the chair anyway. Tammy, bright pink blouse, thick eyeliner, still wearing the same hoop earrings she probably wore in high school, draped the cape around him like she was tucking him in for a nap. I haven't seen you since... What? Jace's graduation party? Lord, that feels like 100 years ago. She talks like that the whole time. High school stories, hair salon gossip. Eli mostly nodded, smiling when she smiled. She didn't mention Jace's death. Not directly. Not in a way that made it hurt. She talked about him like he was still around. Just working late, maybe off somewhere doing something cool. And weirdly, Eli appreciated it. All done, she finally chirped. She spun the chair toward the mirror. Eli blinked. It actually looked good. Really good. His shaggy mess of curls was now trimmed, shaped, pushed back a little with some kind of product that smelled like citrus and made him look almost put together. His confidence clicked up a few notches. Tammy grinned. You're a new man, so what's the occasion? Meeting some cutie, some hunky little... Eli jumped up, cape still half on, bits of hair stuck to his neck. I'm in a hurry. How much do I owe you? He blurted. Tammy raised one eyebrow, smirking like a woman who'd seen this dance before. $15, sugar. He paid fast, stuffed the change in his pocket without counting it, and all but bolted out the door. Outside, his face was hot, his ears even hotter. Some people just know, he thought, embarrassed. They just know somehow.
The phone booth stood at the edge of the hair salon's parking lot. The same one that had been there since he was a kid. Eli stood in front of it, trembling slightly, clutching his notebook like a lifeline. He opened to the back, pulled out the scrap of receipt paper, Jonathan's number. He stared at it for a long time, then reached out, picked up the receiver, and dropped in 2 quarters. The phone rang once, twice. Hello? Eli swallowed. Hey, it's Eli. A pause. Then, Eli, Jonathan said, his voice warm and smooth. Took you long enough. Eli exhaled, letting himself laugh just a little. I've got addresses of the families, the last 2. I'm gonna drive out and talk to them, see what I can find. Alone? Jonathan asked. Eli hesitated. I was going to pick me up at the laundromat. Jonathan said it like it was obvious, like it was already decided. Eli's knees went a little weak with relief. Yeah, okay, I will. I'll bring snacks, Jonathan added lightly, and pepper spray in case this DTH guy is waiting on us. Eli snorted. Funny. Not joking, Jonathan said, then lowered his voice just enough. But mostly I don't want you going out there alone. Eli smiled before he realized he was smiling. Thank you. He hung up, took a deep breath, looked at himself in the reflection of the booth's cracked plastic panel, the haircut, the flushed cheeks, the faintest smile under it all. I can finish this, he thought. I'm going to finish this fucked up story.
Eli pulled into the suds and stuff lot and parked near the edge, Hart doing a weird, fast, slow stutter. His palms were sweating against the wheel, even though the AC was on low. Before stepping out, he checked the rearview mirror, ran a hand through his hair, still holding up. Tammy hadn't lied. It did look better. He popped a mint into his mouth, bit it in half, and closed his eyes for a second like he was about to walk into a job interview or his own funeral. Maybe both. Jonathan was already outside, leaning against the wall beside the laundromat entrance. Head down, hair caught in the breeze, jeans cuffed just enough to show he knew what he was doing. He looked like a movie still. Like James Dean, if James Dean had perfect teeth and a chip bag in one hand. Eli almost drove away, just to spare himself the humiliation. Instead, he parked and tried not to psych himself out. Jonathan turned and grinned as he approached, slinging a canvas bag into the back seat. "Snacks, water, a flashlight, and a tire iron," he said, "in case things get really weird." Eli opened his mouth to respond, but Jonathan leaned in close through the passenger side window. "Hey, I was thinking, mind if I drive?" Eli blinked. Jonathan gestured toward the road. "I basically grew up out there. Ridgeway, the county line, all of it. I know the back roads, the shortcuts, even the gas stations with working bathrooms." Eli laughed before he could stop himself. "Yeah. Okay. That's actually a really good idea." They swapped places. Jonathan slid into the driver's seat like he'd always belonged there, hands already comfortable on the wheel. He adjusted the mirror, popped the transmission into drive, and pulled out of the lot, smooth as butter. Eli tried not to look like he was paying attention to everything. The way Jonathan tapped the wheel with his thumb to the rhythm of the radio. The way he cracked the window just enough to feel the breeze. The way the sunlight hit the edge of his jaw. "New haircut?" Jonathan asked casually. Eli blinked. "What?" Jonathan glanced over with a small grin. "Looks good." Eli's face went hot. He turned quickly to look out the window. "Tammy," he mumbled. "This morning." "She did good," Jonathan said with a smile. Eli tried not to melt into the passenger door. He bit the inside of his cheek, tried to think about murder victims, cryptic initials, stabbed teenagers, anything to drag himself back down from whatever stupid emotional altitude he'd just floated into. But it didn't work, because for the first time in a long time, Eli felt alive. Like maybe the story he was stuck in wasn't just about death. Like maybe it was about something else, too. He kept his eyes on the road and tried not to smile too obviously. The drive out of town was slow and sun-washed, the two-lane highway flickering with tree shadows and forgotten roadside signs. For the first time in what felt like years, Eli let his body sink into the seat and just breathe. Jonathan kept the conversation light, music low. They talked about stupid movies, old teachers, weird local legends, not even the scary ones, just the kind that made small towns feel haunted by people instead of ghosts. Eli found himself laughing. More than once. Floating even. But he hadn't slept. Not really. Not since Jace's voice started bleeding into his dreams. Not since he started seeing blood where there shouldn't be any. Even now, his limbs felt heavy, like they'd been filled with wet sand. Jonathan glanced over after a long silence. "You should crash for a bit," he said softly. "I'll wake you when we're close." Eli hesitated, then nodded. "Just for a few minutes." "I've got us," Jonathan assured him. Eli closed his eyes, the hum of the tires like a lullaby. He drifted fast. In what felt like moments, someone was shaking him gently. "Hey, Eli, wake up." The voice was soft, familiar. Jonathan's. Eli smiled before he even opened his eyes. But when he blinked, it wasn't Jonathan in the driver's seat. It was Jace. He looked just like Eli had remembered. He had a big smile, his perfectly white teeth shining. Except he was covered. Completely. With slick, shining blood. It matted his hair and dripped from beneath his chin. His head lolled unnaturally as the car swerved in slow motion across a landscape of nowhere. "Wake up!" Jace screamed. The voice cracked. Inhuman. It filled the car like feedback, like every speaker was blowing out at once. "Wake up!" Eli jolted awake with a shout, gasping, slamming his back into the passenger door so hard he hit the handle. The seatbelt locked across his chest. His heart pounded like it wanted out. Jonathan swerved slightly, hand tightening on the wheel. Hey, you okay?" He glanced between Eli and the road, eyes wide, voice calm but sharp with concern. Eli looked around, breathing in short, jagged gasps. The window, the road, the radio, the dashboard, not a dream. His face flushed with humiliation so intense he nearly broke. He pressed a hand over his mouth, eyes hot. He almost cried. "Eli," Jonathan said gently. "It's okay. Really." He kept one hand on the wheel. The other, hesitant but steady, reached over and rested lightly on Eli's hand, still clenched in his lap. "This is serious stuff. I know this means a lot to you." Eli stared at their hands. Then out the window, trying to breathe through the shake in his shoulders. Jonathan squeezed his hand once. "We're almost to the motel outside Ridgeway," he said, voice soft. "We'll check in, order a pizza, maybe even watch something dumb." Eli nodded. Just once, and didn't let go of Jonathan's hand. The motel was technically just outside Ridgeway, but everything about it felt like it had been left behind inside the 80s. Faded stucco exterior, buzzing neon sign with a flickering L. A front office that smelled like potpourri and chlorine. Jonathan walked up to the counter first, elbow on the desk like he'd done this 100 times. The woman behind it, mid-50s, lip gloss, southern twang so thick it felt humid, looked up from her soap opera with a tired smile. "We're almost full up, hun," she said. "All I got left is one with a queen." "One bed?" Jonathan asked, all faux surprise. "Afraid so, sugar." Jonathan looked over at Eli, who already felt his stomach plummet. But Jonathan just smiled back at the clerk with a smooth, warm grin that made her blush. "That'll work just fine, ma'am." He slid his ID across the counter. Eli wanted to melt into the floor. The room wasn't bad. Mismatched comforter, thin beige carpet, a little table by the window, and a tiny TV mounted to the wall. A pull-out couch sat opposite the bed, already creaking from years of underpaid guests and overused secrets. Eli dropped his duffel by the nightstand, heart thumping. His palms hadn't stopped sweating since they checked in. Jonathan flopped onto the bed with a groan, then sat up again. "All right," he said, pulling out his phone. "I'm thinking pizza, no anchovies, and a side of mozzarella sticks because we deserve it." "Yeah?" Eli nodded. Jonathan placed the call like he was ordering champagne at a gala. "I'm gonna shower," he said afterward, already peeling off his overshirt. "Try not to solve the whole murder mystery without me." Eli mumbled something unintelligible and flopped into the motel chair, notebook in hand, eyes not on Jonathan's back as he walked to the bathroom and shut the door. The sound of running water started a second later, and Eli's brain officially broke. He tried to focus, tried to match initials again, remember obits, picture the crime scenes. He pulled out the yearbook, started reading, but it all blurred. Because Jonathan was naked behind that door, and Eli hated how his heart wouldn't settle, how badly he wanted to open his mouth and say something, anything. But instead, just sat there with his thoughts spinning like loose quarters in a dryer. "You're not here for this," he told himself. "You're here for Jace." The bathroom door opened. Jonathan stepped out in clean shorts and a soft blue t-shirt, hair damp and curling slightly at the edges. Eli blinked, and quickly looked down at his notes. "Hope the place still has hot water left for you," Jonathan said, smiling, sitting cross-legged on the bed. He pulled the pizza box open and handed Eli a paper plate. They ate in mostly quiet, talked over names, family addresses, tomorrow's schedule, what questions they'd ask, and what they'd do if someone slammed the door in their face. Jonathan asked Eli about Jace. Eli told him everything. The good things, the dumb things, the times they stayed up late playing games and making prank calls, how Jace always let Eli win at Mortal Kombat, how he gave Eli his favorite Daredevil trading card because Daredevil's cool, but not as cool as you, little bro. And how, in the end, someone caved in his brother's skull over a score no one even remembered anymore. Jonathan listened. Really listened. When the pizza was gone and the TV buzzed softly in the background, Jonathan stood, stretched, and gestured toward the pull-out couch. "I'll take this death trap. You get the bed. It's your investigation, Detective Weller." Eli laughed weakly, already climbing under the motel blanket. "Thanks." Jonathan turned the light off with a click. Darkness filled the space like a held breath. Eli lay there, eyes wide open, heart loud in his chest, dreams clawed just behind his eyelids. And despite the quiet, the warmth, the safe distance between two tired guys in a cheap room, he didn't feel safe. He didn't feel okay, but for once, he didn't feel alone either. The next morning, gray light filtered through the motel curtains. Neither of them had really slept. Jonathan woke first and made shitty coffee with the room's ancient drip pot. Eli forced down half a cup and spent 10 minutes rechecking addresses like they might have changed overnight. Then, they hit the road. The map led them to a modest single-story house in an aging neighborhood with cracked sidewalks and chain-link fences. A faded flag hung in the window. A pair of wind chimes clicked softly in the breeze. The mailbox read, "Durham." Eli stopped at the edge of the driveway. "You okay?" Jonathan asked gently. Eli swallowed hard. His stomach felt like wet gravel. His legs were rubber. He gave the smallest nod. They walked up the porch steps side by side. Jonathan knocked. Footsteps shuffled behind the door. It opened just a crack, chain still on, before the woman inside peered out at them through narrow, tired eyes. Late 50s. Hair frayed from years of tension. Eyes hollow, glassy. The kind that had watched too much bad news for too long. "Ma'am," Jonathan said, stepping up smoothly. "I'm sorry to bother you. We're here to ask a few questions about your son, Elias." The name hit like a soft hammer. The woman blinked, then undid the chain and opened the door without a word. They sat in a living room stuck in time. Dust on the TV, cross-stitch pillows, a family photo on the wall that had yellowed from sunlight. She never asked who they were, or why they came. Maybe she didn't care. Maybe she just needed to talk. Her name was Joanne Durham. She poured them glasses of sweet tea and never touched hers. She talked for 15 minutes straight, unprompted, like she was reading it off a script carved into her bones. "He used to work down at the Food Lion. Brought me candy every day, even when I didn't ask. He'd been clean for 6 months. He made one mistake. That's all it takes, right? One time, one bad batch." Her voice cracked once. "I was the one who found him." Jonathan sat forward gently. "Did he ever talk about anyone bothering him? Any enemies?" "Not enemies," she said. "But there was this boy. Older. Name I don't remember. Used to come by asking about Elias after. Said he wanted to honor him. I told him to get the hell off my porch." Eli tensed. Jonathan glanced his way, a shared thought passing silently. Eli finally spoke. Do you happened to remember if Elias ever played arcade games back when he was in school. Places like laundromats with arcades in the back. She stiffened. Eyes sharpened instantly. All the fog replaced by raw, immediate anger. "Don't," she snorted. "Ma'am, don't bring that mess into my house." Her hand shook, knuckles white around the tea glass. "I've heard that garbage from kids, from so-called friends. That game, that urban legend, said it was cursed, said he earned a spot, said it was fate." She stood fast and sharp. "You want to talk about my son? Fine. But I won't sit here while you chalk him up to some bullshit horror story." Her voice cracked fully then. "He's not some damn legend. He was my baby." Eli stood, face flushed. "We're sorry. We'll go." Jonathan followed, quiet. She didn't see them out. Back in the car, they sat in silence for a while. Eli stared at the floorboard, heart twisted tight. "I didn't mean to push her," he muttered. Jonathan started the engine, then let it idle. "You didn't," he said gently. "She just can't afford to believe anything else." They drove in silence. One more address left. One more chance to find the truth. The road out to the Stokes place turned to gravel 10 minutes past the last gas station. Cornfields on either side, skeletal and browning in the heat. A barn sagged off to one side like it was giving up. A tire swing hung crooked from a dying tree. Eli and Jonathan pulled up slow. A man stood in the yard, jeans torn at the knees, arms corded with sun-dark muscle and grit. He was fixing the fence, or maybe just hitting it hard enough to feel something. His hair was gray, but his face was young enough to still be angry. He watched them approach with squinting suspicion, spitting a long string of tobacco onto the dry grass as they neared. Jonathan raised a hand. "Excuse me, sir." "What the hell you want?" The man spat. His voice was sharp as a rusted barbed wire. "We're looking into an old case. You had a son, Liam." "Had being the key word," the man muttered. "We were hoping to talk about him. I'm Eli. This is Jonathan." The man looked them over. Once. Twice. Something in his eyes changed, just enough to chill the air. "Ain't got time for this queer shit," he muttered. Eli stiffened. Jonathan didn't blink. "Sir, we're just trying to understand," Eli started. "Understand what? That my kid was a dumbass who got in deep with a bunch of towny thugs and wound up with a knife in his belly? Ain't nothing else to know." He spit again, this time near Eli's foot. Eli took a step forward, fists clenched. "We're just trying to find out if anyone connected to Liam had the initials DTH. It's part of a pattern." "You fucking berries believe that horse shit? That urban legend garbage? That's what you're digging up?" He stormed forward. "My boy's 6 feet under and you're playing fucking Ghostbusters?" Without warning, he grabbed Eli by the shirt and shoved him backward. Eli hit the dirt hard. Wind knocked from his chest. "Hey!" Jonathan barked. Before the man could step again, Jonathan's fist cracked across his jaw. The man reeled, stunned. Blood welled in the corner of his mouth. Jonathan stepped forward and drove his foot into the man's ribs. A sharp thud followed by a shout. "You touch him again and I'll bury you out here." The man rolled onto his back, face scrunched in pain. He didn't fight back, he just held his side, coughing, eyes burning. Then the tears started. Just go. Get the hell off my land, please." His voice broke. "Just leave me alone." As Eli and Jonathan backed toward the car, the man curled sideways in the grass, hands to his face, sobbing. "My baby boy, he was just a baby." Back in the car, the silence stretched between them. Eli wiped dirt off his jeans, his skin still humming with adrenaline. Jonathan gripped the steering wheel tight. "You all right?" Eli nodded slowly. Yeah. He looked out the window. We didn't get anything about DTH. No names, no leads. Jonathan glanced at him. Maybe not, but I think we just saw the cost of holding on to guilt. Of believing you failed someone. Eli exhaled hard. He wasn't sure if the man hated them, hated himself, or both. But he knew now they weren't even close to the truth.
Back at the motel, the room was dim and yellowed with early evening. Eli sat on the edge of the bed. He hadn't moved in an hour. The sun dipped behind the curtain slats and faint orange lines that streaked across the carpet and the bottom of his jeans. The files were a mess now. Scrawled notes, folded obituaries, scratched out theories. A wrinkled yearbook page clung to the edge of the nightstand. He'd rearranged everything, cross-referenced names, redrew timelines. But it still didn't add up. No DTH, no name, no face, just initials on the leaderboard. He leaned back and stared at the ceiling, mouth dry, head buzzing from stress and exhaustion. He hadn't dreamed the night before. And somehow, that was worse. Jonathan stood by the door, wallet in hand. "I'm gonna go grab something. Liquor store's still open down the road. You want anything?" Eli shook his head slowly. "I'm good." Jonathan lingered a moment longer. "You sure?" "Yeah." "All right, back in a bit." Jonathan turned, the door shut behind him. The silence returned. Eli sat forward again, elbows on his knees. The weight of the last 2 days draped across his back like soaking wet clothes. On the nightstand sat the old photograph, the one he kept folded in the inside flap of his wallet. A sunlit day outside the old theater, maybe 6 months before Jace died. Eli, Jace, Mia, smiling, a triangle of joy before it shattered. Eli stared at the photo for a long time. A pulse in his neck ticked like a second hand. Then, almost on instinct, he picked up the motel phone. The number was still there in his memory. Muscle deep. He hesitated, thumb hovering, and dialed. The line rang, twice, then a click. "Hello?" A voice, older, confused, female. Eli swallowed. Hi, Mrs. Carter?" A pause, then, "Yes?" "This is Eli. Eli Weller." Long silence. "Oh." Eli heard the sound of her adjusting the phone, maybe sitting down. "I wasn't expecting to hear that name again. Not after all this time. I didn't mean to startle you. I just wanted to talk to Mia, if that's okay." Eli replied, a bit ashamed. "It's been, 7 years?" Mrs. Carter's tone shifted. "She has a son now, you know. They live in my guest room, never went far. Please, I just need a minute." Eli sounded desperate. Another pause. Shuffling. A muted voice in the background. Then the receiver shifting. And a long beat of silence. Then, "Eli?" It was Mia. Her voice was different. Lower, wearier, but undeniably her. Like a song you hadn't heard since high school, half forgotten until it played again. Eli's chest tightened. "Hey, it's been a long time."
Eli? Her voice had softened by the second syllable, as if saying his name put a crack in a wall she hadn't meant to let fall. "Hey, Mia." His throat tightened. "How have you been?" The words came gentle, like she was afraid of pushing too hard. Eli chuckled dryly. It's complicated." A silence passed between them, familiar and heavy. Then he exhaled. He hadn't planned to dump it all, not so fast. But it came out like breath he'd been holding for years. He told her everything. The leaderboard, the initials, the victims, the motel, the dreams, Jace. When he finished, the line went quiet. Eli stared down at the photo in his hand, heart pounding like he just confessed something unholy. You know I have a son now, Eli? She asked as if she hadn't heard anything he just said. He blinked. Yeah. That's great. I heard his name is Jace. Mia's voice cracked a little. That shut him up. She spoke before he could reply, her voice tight like a knot pulled hard. I just wanted to hold on to something. A piece of him. He was my whole world back then. You know that, right? Eli felt tears run cold down his face. He didn't wipe them. I loved him. I did. We were just dumb kids, but I loved him. His breath hitched. They sat in silence, their grief humming together across 7 years in a phone line. Then Mia's voice dropped lower, cautious. Before your brother went for that high score, he was asking around. Like, a lot. About DTH. Eli's eyes widened. He didn't go into that game blind. I don't think he believed the legend or whatever, but he knew something. She hesitated. He thought it was some guy. A loner. Lived in a shithole. Behind the laundromat. That's all he ever told me. A baby cried in the background. A soft, tired wail. Eli, I've got to go. Just be careful. Please. Eli hesitated, then said, I'm not doing this alone. There was a pause on the line. I'm with Jonathan, from Ridgeway. Mia didn't speak for a second. My cousin Jonathan? She asked, surprised but not unkind. How the hell did he end up with you? Eli gave a soft laugh through his nose. I don't know. Luck, maybe. He just showed up, washing his clothes. Right when I was digging through the scores. We've been driving around for 2 days, talking to the families of the other kids on the leaderboard. He's been helping. A lot. I probably would have quit by now if it wasn't for him. There was a quiet noise on the other end. Maybe a small surprised smile. Eli couldn't tell. The line went dead. Eli sat staring at the phone, hand trembling, behind the laundromat. Not a mile from where it started, from where Jace ended. And just like that, he had a name to chase. The door to the motel room creaked open. Jonathan stepped in with a brown paper bag, wind-blown and grinning. Victory fuel, he said, lifting the bottle inside. Only the finest gas station whiskey. But his smile faded when he saw Eli's face. What happened? Eli was seated at the edge of the bed, the photo of Jason, Mia, and himself in his hand. I talked to Mia. Jonathan froze halfway through setting the bag on the dresser. You what? I called her. Eli smirked. Eli... Jonathan rubbed his forehead, pacing once, then stopping. You called your dead brother's ex-girlfriend? After all the stuff we've seen, the grief, the wreckage these deaths left behind, and you thought ripping that scab off was a good idea? Eli held up a hand, eyes still glassy from the call. She was glad to hear from me, really. Jonathan exhaled sharply. What did she say? Eli repeated it all. Her voice, the grief, the son named Jace, and then the name. Darren Troy Haskett, Eli said, leaning in like he was afraid the walls might be listening. Jace asked about him before he ever played Kill Screen. He lives behind the goddamn laundromat. Jonathan stared, then broke into a disbelieving laugh. No way, no fucking way. Way. Eli smirked again. They sat down across from each other, grinning like kids with a treasure map. It wasn't joy, it was relief, purpose, the kind that made things real again. They cracked open the whiskey. It burned, but neither cared. The conversation spiraled into late-night delirium. Half theories, half-baked plans. They found some old horror flick on cable, something gory and dumb. They heckled it between swigs, safe in the glow of artificial monster guts and weak bourbon. An hour in, Jonathan made some ridiculous joke about how every killer in horror movies would be caught immediately if people just carried a gun. "Maybe not you, Eli," Jonathan teased. "You'd be the first to go." He chuckled. Eli laughed, maybe too hard. He shoved him playfully in the arm. Jonathan went quiet. His eyes shifted. And then, without hesitation, he reached across the space between them and pulled Eli in. Fast. Their lips met. Heat. Clumsy at first, but unashamed. Eli froze, then melted. His fingers curled in the fabric of Jonathan's t-shirt, his mind a haze of fire and disbelief. No more pushing it down, no more pretending, just closeness and breath in a night that didn't need explaining. Morning broke in soft gold over the curtains, and the day ahead didn't feel quite so heavy.
The drive back to Haven Hill was different. No radio, no rush, just open road, open sky, and something lighter riding between them. Eli leaned his head against the passenger window, watching rows of trees slip by. His stomach fluttered. Not in fear this time, but in that slow, blooming way he remembered from the dumb crushes of his teen years. He hadn't dreamed last night. For the first time in weeks, the dark had held no blood, no cracked smiles, no arcade buzz echoing behind his eyelids. Only warmth. Only Jonathan. They arrived just before noon, pulling around the side of the strip mall. The laundromat looked the same as ever. Faded sign, dented soda machine out front, the hum of dryers behind the walls. But now it felt smaller somehow. Less myth and more rot. "There," Jonathan said, nodding through the windshield. Behind the main building, tucked off a gravel service road, sat a single-story structure, halfway between a shack and a condemned mobile home. Corrugated metal panels, tarps nailed over windows, a yard scattered with rusted tools, broken furniture, and a satellite dish that had long since given up. A man sat on the porch in a weathered lawn chair, barefoot. He looked mid-50s, but time had not been kind. Long, greasy, gray-streaked hair hung to his shoulders in unwashed tangles. A patchy beard bristled across his jaw in tufts. His skin was leathery, sun-seared. He smoked with slow, mechanical drags. Each exhale rose like fog from a body already half dead. Eli leaned forward, squinting. "Is that—" Jonathan nodded grimly. The man turned slightly, and Eli saw it. His right eye was milk white, glazed over with a cataract scar that ran jagged from brow to cheekbone. He blinked slowly, absently, as though remembering a dream he couldn't quite shake. Eli shivered. He didn't look evil. He looked empty, like someone who'd been carved out long ago and had just kept on breathing by mistake. "Darren Troy Haskett," Jonathan whispered. "That's gotta be him." They stayed parked across the street, half hidden by a cluster of bushes and a dumpster, just watching. No music, no talking, just the ticking of the engine and the slow, endless draw of the man's cigarette. Jonathan killed the engine. The silence felt sudden, like stepping into a vacuum. Eli stared through the windshield at the hunched figure on the porch, hands tightening in his lap until the fabric of his jeans strained beneath his fingers. "It's now or never," Jonathan said softly. Eli turned from him, and for once didn't hesitate. He opened the door. The dry gravel crunched beneath their feet as they approached the ramshackle home, the sun bearing down in heavy waves. The place reeked of gasoline, mildew, and rotting wood. Darren Troy Haskett didn't look up until they were nearly at the porch. When he did, Eli froze. That face, creased, burnt, half shadowed by a frayed camo cap, was more than angry.
It was intentional. Like he'd already imagined how this scene might end, and none of those imaginings involved peace. You, Darren Haskett? Eli asked, voice sharper than he expected. The man's one good eye locked on him. A pause, then a sneer. Yeah, who's asking? Eli's throat dried instantly. Every muscle screamed to move, forward, backward, anywhere, but his feet locked in place. What now? What could he say to a man who might have murdered his brother? Jonathan stepped forward, cool and collected. You ever play kill screen? That got him. Darren turned, his eye narrowing like he was only now noticing Jonathan existed. Then without warning, he stood. Fast. Too fast. His whole body tense like coiled wire, and the look on his face curdled into something wild. Unpredictable. Maybe I have, he growled. Have you? He let out a laugh, high-pitched, unhinged, and wrong. Then with a smooth, practiced motion, he reached behind his back. Metal flashed. A long, brutal knife gleamed in the daylight, drawn from a leather sheath worn flat against his spine. The blade was ugly, chipped and darkened by age and use. He pointed it straight at Jonathan's chest. What do you want, huh? You two want to die tonight or what? Eli's heart thudded into his ribs. He stepped forward without thinking. Did you kill my brother, you sick bastard? Darren's face split into a twisted grin. Fuck you, he spat. And your brother. Eli surged forward, fury boiling over, but Jonathan caught him by the shoulder, held him fast. Listen, boys, Darren hissed, voice dropping to a hiss. His blade never wavered. You'd better fuck off now. I'm not playing your little games. And then he turned without warning, boots stomping up the warped porch planks. He flung open the door and slammed it shut so hard the frame shook. Eli stood frozen, pulse ringing in his ears. Jonathan released him slowly. No sirens, no witnesses, no justice. Just a door. And behind it, the last piece of the puzzle. Jonathan moved the car in front of the laundromat. The late afternoon sun dipped low, stretching the shadows of the laundromat across the pavement like reaching arms. Eli paced just outside, dragging his hands through his hair. We should call the cops. I mean, he practically admitted it. You saw the knife. He threatened us. Jonathan leaned against the car, arms folded, eyes steady. He didn't look shaken, just calculating. And what do we tell them? He asked calmly. That a man with a scarred eye and a knife got mad when we accused him of murder with no proof? Eli stopped pacing. He turned slowly. He said, fuck your brother. That's not proof? Jonathan raised an eyebrow. To us, yeah. But not in a courtroom. Not to cops who have already not solved this for years. We've got a ghost story and some yearbook clippings. Eli slumped against the hood of the car, suddenly drained. So what do we do? Just walk away? Pretend none of this happened? Jonathan didn't answer right away. He reached into the car and pulled something from the center console. A single quarter. He flipped it in the air, caught it, stared down at the silver glint in his palm. Then he looked up. We beat the high score. Eli blinked. What? Darren comes after the person who knocks him off the top, every time. That's the only consistent pattern, so we beat his score and we wait. The idea struck Eli like cold water. You want to use me as bait. Not you, us, Jonathan corrected. Jonathan stepped forward, holding Eli's gaze. We finished this. We put him in the one position he's been in 5 times before, except this time, we're ready. Eli looked toward the door of the laundromat. The familiar buzz of fluorescent lights hummed behind the bricks. And beyond that, the arcade room, the game, kill screen. He felt sick. He felt furious. He felt ready. All right, he said, voice hardening. Let's fucking do it. The laundromat was nearly empty. Just the two of them now, surrounded by the hum of dryers and the dim flicker of fluorescent tubes. A single out-of-order sign hung limp on one of the washers like a surrender flag. The arcade room in the back buzzed with a different kind of energy. Eli stood beside the kill screen cabinet, rolling his shoulders, stretching out his fingers. Jonathan fed crumpled bills into the change machine, and a flood of quarters clattered into the metal tray below like falling teeth. "All right," Jonathan said, scooping them into a plastic cup. "Let's kill some pixels." They started playing, taking turns. First Jonathan, steady, strategic, then Eli, twitchy, nervous. The game was harder than it looked. The controls were stiff, the screen glitchy in spots. The enemies moved fast, unfair, learning patterns and punishing sloppiness. Kill screen didn't want to be beaten. Eli wiped sweat from his forehead as his sixth attempt ended in failure. Jonathan stepped in with a shrug, cracking his knuckles. They weren't talking much anymore. Just the clink of coins, the crackle of digital static, the echo of game over chimes. Hours passed. The night grew thick outside, laundromat lights glowing like a forgotten memory on the empty street. And then, something shifted. Eli was on his 12th attempt. Something clicked. His fingers moved without thinking. He entered a kind of flow. The chaos of the screen made sense. The timing, the roots, the glitches. He moved through them like water. Jonathan leaned in, watching. "You're doing it," he whispered. Eli didn't speak, didn't blink, didn't breathe. The score climbed and climbed and climbed. JAC, Jace, flashed by on the leaderboard, then DTH, and finally, a new high score stuttered across the screen in glitchy red letters. The game froze for a second, then brought up the entry screen. 3 blinking spaces. "What should I put?" Eli asked, voice hoarse. Jonathan didn't hesitate. "Put ELI. This is your night. Your justice for Jace. You earned this." He said it was something close to pride. And then, with a smile, he leaned in and kissed Eli on the cheek, a triumphant little smack. Eli smiled, stunned. He entered the letters slowly. ELI, and just like that, he was number 1. The screen flashed. The music cut out. The room suddenly felt very, very quiet. Jonathan let out a long breath and leaned against the edge of the game cabinet, the glow of ELI still flickering on the screen behind him. "Jeez," he muttered, wiping sweat from his brow. "My eyes and fingers hurt." He laughed, but it came out hollow, like the end of adrenaline, the moment the high breaks. "I gotta get some fresh air." Eli nodded, still staring at the screen. He heard the bell above the laundromat door jingle softly as Jonathan stepped into the cool night. He was alone now, and he felt powerful. He had done it. After everything, after grief, guilt, sleepless nights, and years of silence, he had taken the top score. His name was etched in that cursed machine, burned into the circuit board, just like Jace always told him it would be. He stood taller, stronger. He could almost hear Jace's voice again. "You're going to have to beat this one day, little bro." But his shirt clung to him with sweat, and his hands trembled. Eli made his way to the back of the laundromat. The dingy bathroom light hummed overhead, casting a yellow pall over the cracked sink and graffiti-tagged mirror. He turned on the tap. Cold water sputtered out. He splashed his face, bracing palms on the sink, breathing deep. The bathroom door creaked shut behind Eli as he stepped out into the laundromat's dim glow, wiping his face dry with his sleeve. The arcade room behind him still blinked with the faint, victorious glow of his high score. ELI. He smiled for half a second. until he heard it. Raised voices, shouting, then slam! The front door burst open. Jonathan stumbled in like a man sprinting from a wildfire, eyes wide, chest heaving. He grabbed the door frame to stop himself from collapsing. "He's coming!" he shouted, voice cracking. "He's right behind me." Before Eli could speak, before the question could form, he came through the door. Darren trod past him. He didn't walk. He charged, like a lion loosed from a cage. His long, greasy hair clung to his sweat-soaked face, the whites of his eyes wild. One of them, the dead one, stared blindly forward, white and veined with a scar that split through it. The other eye burned with something far worse. Intent. In his hand was a long hunting knife, curved and gleaming in the fluorescent light. "I told you!" Darren roared. Spittle flew from his mouth. His voice sounded like a furnace full of rusted nails. "I told you what would happen. You stupid little shits. You had to fucking play with me, didn't you?" He stormed forward, full sprint, knife raised, straight at Jonathan. Eli didn't have time to think. He only had time to move. The knife flashed in the air as Darren swung hard at Jonathan, slicing through empty space just inches from his chest. Jonathan stumbled back. Eli didn't think. He reacted. He grabbed a metal stool from beside the coin changer and hurled it across the room. It struck Darren across the temple with a sickening crack, blood blooming instantly above his eyebrow. The man staggered but didn't fall. His head snapped toward Eli, eyes feral, nostrils flaring. The stench of sweat, cigarettes, and stale booze rolled off him like heat from a vent. He roared and charged at Eli, knife forward. "You little shit." But Jonathan was already moving. He went low and swept Darren's legs out from under him in one sharp kick. The larger man hit the floor hard, a breathy grunt escaping his lips as the knife skittered from his hand and spun across the room in a metallic whirl. Darren growled, wild and thrashing. In one brutal motion, he rolled and snatched Jonathan to the floor, pressing his full weight down and wrapping both hands around his throat. "Grab the knife," Jonathan choked, his face turning purple. Eli dove across the floor. His fingers scraped carpet until he found metal. He turned, knife in hand, just as Jonathan headbutted, Darren square in the nose, the crunch of cartilage sharp in the air. Darren reeled, loosened his grip. Jonathan twisted, rolled, pinned him. "Finish it," he screamed, blood streaming from his forehead. Eli screamed too. And then he was there, driving the blade down into Darren's chest with everything he had. It sank deep. Darren's eyes shot wide. He coughed blood, a bubbling gurgle reaching one last desperate hand toward Jonathan's throat. But his strength was already gone. He collapsed, twitching once. Only his good eye closed.
The room was silent except for the clicking of the arcade cabinets and the soft hum of fluorescence. Both men were still, their shoulders rising and falling with exhaustion. The air hung heavy with heat, sweat, blood, and something else now. Finality. It was over. Darren's body lay crumpled, face slack, mouth half open in a last grimace. Jonathan stared down at him, jaw loose, hands on his knees. Eli couldn't move for a moment. He felt sick, shaking. But underneath it, a strange weightlessness. Like something had been peeled away from his chest. Something that had been there since the funeral. He stood up, spine trembling, hot tears sliding down his cheeks. He turned to the kill screen machine. It blinked innocently. The demo loop played. Chiptunes chirped. Behind him, Jonathan stood like a statue, not speaking, still staring at Darren's body. Eli stepped slowly toward the screen, wiping at his eyes. The high score list rolled up again. The circle was broken. Eli had done what no one else could. DTH would never climb back up. "I did it, Chase," he whispered. That's when he felt it. Lightning through his spine. His entire body jolted forward, mouth opening wide as pink-tinged foam bubbled up from his throat. His knees buckled. He looked down. The knife handle was jutting from his side, Darren's blade, buried deep beneath his ribs. He turned in confusion and horror. Jonathan stood behind him, not reaching to catch him, not crying, just standing. A faint smile on his lips, eyebrows raised, like someone had just whispered the punchline to a cruel joke. Eli fell. His palm slapped the floor. He gasped, choking, vision flickering. Jonathan just watched. Then he smirked, shrugged like, "What can I say?" "You almost had it," he said softly. "Almost." "Why?" Eli choked the word, barely audible through the blood flooding his mouth. Jonathan grinned like he'd just stepped out on stage. "Whoa there, buddy, why?" "Is that what you're asking?" He tapped his chin theatrically, pacing a slow circle like a stand-up comic pretending to consider a punchline. "Well, let me think. I'm a demonic spirit possessing this game." He threw his arms out and cackled, voice mocking, cartoonish. "Oh!" He twirled a finger in the air, eyes wide in parody. Then he snapped back, serious for just a heartbeat. "Nah." He squatted down next to Eli, voice dropping to something calm, almost bored. "Truth is, I guess everyone's got a hobby." One quick clap, and Jonathan jumped to his feet, doing a little heel shuffle like a man in his own musical number. "This is mine." Eli tried to scoot backward, hands slippery with blood, gasping through sobs. Jonathan smiled as if Eli had just handed him a Valentine.
Eli, don't be like that. You're hurting my feelings.
His voice dripped with mock offense.
I mean, come on. You had such a hard-on for me. You didn't even put up a fight at the motel.
He leaned down, face inches from Eli's, eyes gleaming with cruel delight.
Holy shit, man, Jonathan snorted. It works every fucking time. Men, women, teens, adults, whatever.
I mean, am I that good looking? He smoothed back his hair and made a mock model pout, striking a fake sexy pose with his hand behind his head. Eli trembled, pain blooming through every inch of his body, but he wasn't looking at Jonathan anymore. His eyes were on the kill screen cabinet. The screen blinked. Jonathan followed his gaze, then gave a chuckle.
"This thing?"
he said, thumbing toward the machine like it was an old friend.
"Eli, baby,"
he said, voice soft like a lullaby.
"It's just a fucking game. I mean, yeah, I've used it for a while. Built a story around it, played the part. Urban legends are useful."
He turned back to Eli, standing over him like a statue with too many smiles carved in.
"But the game? The score? It's just one of my fucked up ideas. I have lots of them."
Jonathan began pacing again, nodding to the beat of music only he could hear.
"I've been killing people all over the place while this bumfuck town focused on just this." "God, you people are adorable!"
Eli kept crawling, still sobbing. Jonathan shoved him back flat with the heel of his foot. Stay put, killer." He grinned again. "By the way, damn, Eli, you totally killed that guy. Cold steel to the chest." "Your balls really dropped, huh?" He clapped once more, laughing to himself, spinning slowly as he took in the scene like a painter admiring his canvas. What a goddamn performance. Eli was starting to black out. Every breath sawed through his ribs like broken glass. He could barely keep Jonathan in focus. The world shrank, darkening at the edges. But Jonathan kept talking, reveling, glowing. This guy, Darren. Jonathan kicked at the corpse near him with a casual sneaker. He's just some scary-looking fuck. A drunk, Eli. That's it. Only thing he was guilty of was, well, looking like a murderer. He smiled wider,
as if it were the punchline to a joke only he found funny. People fucked with him for years. He's seen me in here, coming and going. Hell, I think he expected me tonight. And I wasn't even going to involve him. But the pieces, they always fall into place for me. Eli whimpered as he tried to shift, his hand pressing into the sticky warmth at his side. Jonathan walked a circle around him, arms wide like he was conducting a symphony. Calling Mia? Jesus, Eli, I didn't plan for that. That was your little twist. I nearly shit myself when you said you started talking about her cousin Jonathan. I had to improvise. Fast. He pointed both fingers at Eli like fake pistols and made a pew-pew noise. And the hotel? God, I thought I'd have to kill you before you got another shot at the game. But no, you melted like butter. All it took was a crooked smile, a few sympathetic glances, and bam! You practically offered yourself up. Eli's mouth trembled. He covered his face with his hands, sobbing silently. Eli. Jonathan crouched. Eli, look at me. When Eli didn't move, Jonathan's voice snapped with venom. Look at me! Eli lowered his hands, his vision blurred and red. Jonathan grinned again, wicked and bright. I'm not fucking Jonathan, he whispered. Never even met the guy. For all I know, he's buried in a ditch somewhere, or worse. He stood and stretched like a man done with his work. This was a masterpiece. I'll never top it. He looked down at Eli almost fondly. Well, it's been fun, really. I'll never forget you. Jonathan leaned down, voice softening to a faux whisper. And you know what, Eli? You can keep the high score. You earned it. He gave a little salute, a theatrical mocking thing, and walked out the door like a man stepping off stage to thunderous applause. Eli lay alone. He was barely conscious, the buzzing of the arcade machines like flies in his ears. Then, a warmth. A hand. He opened his eyes. Jace was there, sitting cross-legged beside him just like he used to during all-night movie marathons in the room. His face was pale, eyes glassy, a sadness bottomless in them. But he smiled. Jace reached out and touched Eli's head, gently, lovingly. It's not over, little brother, he whispered. Eli tried to hold on, and then he could hear voices, distant, rushed. A wash of light pulsed against his eyelids, blue, red, white. The sound of radios, feet pounding pavement, someone shouting for a medic. Eli closed his eyes, and everything went dark.
The veil draws shut once more, and our guest from beyond fades into the hush of candlelight. You've done well to linger this long, friend. Not everyone has the stomach for such company. But should you ever feel that cold breath on your neck, or hear a whisper that don't belong to the living, just return here to the Seance Society, where the dead speak and the living listen. Like and subscribe if you dare.